and she was always of Indian heritage, and she was only promoting Indian heritage. I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. So I don't know, is she Indian or is she black?
Former US President Donald Trump launched a scathing attack on Vice President Kamala Harris, questioning her racial identity, asking whether she was either black or belonged to Indian heritage. Trump falsely claimed that the Vice President had not emphasized her Asian American heritage while downplaying her black heritage. Now, Trump's response has drawn condemnation from Kamala Harris, who is of Indian and Jamaican heritage, calling it, quote-unquote, the same old show of divisiveness and disrespect. But Kamala Harris's identity still remains a big talking point and also her biggest asset.
The American people deserve better. The American people deserve better. The American people deserve a leader who tells the truth, a leader who does not respond with hostility and anger when confronted with the facts. We deserve a leader who understands that our differences do not divide us. They are an essential source of our strength.
So what will Kamala Harris's presidency mean for India-US ties? Well, Kamala Harris still has to win the Democratic nomination. But if she does, she will script history, being the first Indian American and black woman to lead the ticket of a major political party. If she goes on to win the US election, she will be the country's first woman president. Many Indian Americans see Kamala Harris as another shining example of the diaspora's success and their influence. Kamala Harris, with her Indian origin, brings a lot of excitement and support from the Indian American community. And her endorsement has energized the South Asian voters, which is a growing force in the key swing states. But there has also been a muted response from India, as few see any drastic change in the Indo-US ties. Interestingly, despite her Indian origin, Kamala Harris hasn't really tapped her Indian identity heavily, and her policy portfolio hasn't focused on India. When Joe Biden picked Kamala Harris as his running mate, much of India was abuzz over how the first Indian American in the White House might affect the future of US-India relations. Now, Harris is a step closer to capturing the Democratic nomination for president. Few are expecting any drastic changes in ties should she win. Despite Kamala Harris's well-documented Indian heritage and family links to the country, there is very little indication that her presidency would meaningfully tip in the direction of the US-India relationship. India-US relations may have improved over the years, but India hasn't really been a personal priority for Kamala Harris, who has instead focused her energy on domestic issues like abortion, immigration, or securing the US-Mexico border. Kamala Harris did host Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi at White House last year, where she talked about her Indian heritage while praising Modi's leadership. But then she hasn't visited India during her time as the Vice President. While on the campaign trail in 2019, Kamala Harris even criticized Modi's policies on Kashmir when the Prime Minister revoked Article 370. Harris at that time had rebuked the move. Now, there is a growing concern of Kamala Harris's comments in issues related to Indian democracy and human rights, which has ruffled quite a few feathers in India. She has been seen more as an American than an Indian American. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Modi is widely believed to enjoy warmer and more personal ties with Donald Trump, who is the Republicans' candidate for the president. Both leaders have hosted each other at political rallies in their respective countries, with Trump holding a Howdy Modi event in Houston before a huge crowd of Indian Americans in September 2019, just days after Modi's new policy in Kashmir. Now, that event was followed up in 2020 with a visit by Trump to Modi's home state of Gujarat for a huge event that was billed Namaste Trump. It was there that the US president addressed a rally of nearly 100,000 people at a stadium in the city of Ahmedabad. According to Harsh Shringla, who's the former Indian ambassador to the United States, he says either way, from India's perspective, whether it is Republican or Democrat, the relationship enjoys bipartisan support and should not be affected. Since ties with New Delhi are viewed favorably by both parties in Washington, there would perhaps be very little impact on the relationship regardless of which party wins or the candidate's Indian roots. Interestingly, both Harris and Usha Vance, the wife of Republican vice presidential candidate J.D. Vance, has also links to southern India. Vance belongs to a family of renowned academics. Harris, who has garnered the backing of enough delegates to secure the Democratic nomination, is viewed as a role model in her mother's ancestral village. Kamala Harris, who visited that village as a 5-year-old, recalls her walks with her grandfather on the beach of the city of Chennai, where the family later lived. However, she hasn't really been back since then and since becoming the US Vice President. Interestingly, it was Republican Party leader Vivek Ramaswamy who recalled how Kamala Harris leaned onto her Indian American identity when she ran for office in California, adding that she wears this different identity only when it's politically convenient on national stage. He further claimed that Harris all of a sudden made a turn in her identity and now wants to be known as black. Well, the impact of a potential Kamala Harris presidency would be much greater for American politics. The fact that she was vice president did not really have a substantive impact on India-US ties, but regardless of who wins, India-US ties is expected to grow over shared concerns and issues. Indians also are familiar with members of the diaspora in high offices abroad. So while Kamala Harris's identity is expected to excite the Indian diaspora in the United States, which it is doing, India is still watching the developments very closely. And what will the Democratic presumptive nominee strategic stance be towards the subcontinent?